Santana Barragón, Carlos Humaberto, was born at Outland on July 20, 1947, Mexico's Navarro, Jalisco, to a musical family. José Santana, his father, was a Carlos and a mariachi violinist, started, at the age of 5, playing the violin and switching by the age of 8 to the guitar. Influenced by blues musicians like B.B. and his father John Lee King and T-Bone Walker Hooker, he became passionate about music early on. In Tijuana, his family relocated in 1955. Carlos was exposed to American blues, rock and roll, later in the morning to San Francisco 1960s, engrossing him in the colorful music scene of the counterculture. He turned into a U.S. citizen by naturalization in 1965. The Santana Blues were founded by Santana. In 1966, the band changed its name to simply Santana. The group was the first to combine Afro-band, jazz, blues, Latin, and rock rhythms that are distinguished by Carlos' melodious guitar lines with a blues foundation, and timbals reminiscent of Latin percussion and congas. Their discovery was accompanied by iconic performance at Woodstock in 1969, even though Carlos was subject to the impact of LSD, which he subsequently said he little recalled. Their first album, Santana 1969, with the popular song Evil Ways, gained the 4th position on the Billboard Dutch charts. Erase's 1970 follow-up with Strike Swan Gypsy Queen, The Black Magic Woman, and Okova was at the top of the charts, stayed for 88 weeks, earning 4 times platinum standing. Santana 3 Caravanserai and 1971-1972 cemented their success even more, although the latter signaled a change in direction toward blend of jazz that reflects Santana's admiration for John Cole and Miles Davis Train. Throughout the years, Santana's songs changed, adding jazz fusion and spiritual components. He turned into a follower of the early 1970s with Sri Chinmoy taking on the name Devadeep, which means the light of the greatest lamp, and eventually became a Christian in 1992. His albums with experimental elements such as Illumination's Alice Collar Train in 1974 was less profitable but creatively bold, with the labeling of Some by Columbia Records, similar to Lotus 1974, as a result of their career suicide appeal to a certain niche. Santana encountered conflict with his label, yet continued to publish albums such as Moonflower and Amigos 1976-1977. Personnel frequently joined his band, Alterations, but Carlos stayed the continuous, working with artists such as John McLaughlin, Buddy Miles, and Hancock Herbie. 1999 saw Santana host A Spectacular Return with Supernatural, a collaboration-heavy record with Rob Lauryn Hill, Eric Clapton, Thomas, and others. More than 25 million copies were sold, earned 9 Grammys, matching Michael Jackson's record with the most in 1 year, and featured the popular song Smooth, the second most successful single person ever time for each Billboard. Later albums such as All That I Am, 2005, Shaman, 2002, Blessings and Miracles, and Corazon 2014, his legacy was carried on in 2021. Santana possesses sold more than 100 million copies, played for more than 100 million admirers, and won 10 Latin Grammy Awards and Grammy Awards prizes. He became a member of the rock and was inducted into the Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, the 2013 Kennedy Center Honors, and came in at number 11 on the Rolling Stones list of 2023's best guitarists. Beyond Santana is a philanthropist and musician, Deborah King, his first wife, married from 1973 until 2007, and established the Magro 1998 Foundation, which has made donations more than $8 million to help poor children in the arts, health, and education. He got married, Cindy Blackman, drummer, in 2010, and they worked together on initiatives such as Power of with the Ely Brothers, Peace in 2017. Additionally, Santana offers a range of goods under ROC, such as guitars, shoes, and cannabis, which reflects his culture impact. First, conquering childhood trauma. From the age of 10, additionally, Carlos Santana was exposed to recurring sexual assault by a male American who took advantage of his weakness. Living in Tijuana, Mexico, following his relatives in 1955, they moved from Outlawan. Young in the United States and Mexico, Carlos was enticed border with assurances of toys and presents, a deceptive strategy that preyed upon his innocence and financial difficulty. The abuser, whose name Santana has not revealed made public, exploited the boy's confidence, establishing a relationship of coercion and confidentiality. In a Rolling in the Stone interview, Santana bravely disclosed this terrible period in his life, explaining how he first shut out the trauma as a way to cope. As a kid, He did not have the emotional resources to process or explain the mistreatment, burying the suffering in the depths of his mind. The abuse had place during a developmental stage. Santana had already begun navigating when changes in culture and personal life. When his family relocated to Tijuana, he was exposed to fresh musical inspirations like American blues, rock and roll, yet the mariachi heritage of the father ingrained a passion for music. However, the trauma of abuse loomed large over these years, producing a subtle weight that would continue to maturity. The psychological effects of such encounters have been extensively documented. Sexual assault throughout childhood frequently results in sentiments of guilt, shame, and evaluation, interfering with a victim's sense of self and safety. Regarding Santana, the mistreatment was not just against his body, as well as an attack on his forming an identity, creating scars that would take years to resolve. As according to the Rolling Stone Santana interview, he denied recollections of the maltreatment as a youngster, a typical reaction from survivors who dissociate intuitively in order to survive severe trauma. This suppression enabled him to work and follow his aspirations in music, but it did not eliminate the psychological cost. The family's moving to San Francisco in the beginning, Santana spent the 1960s absorbed in the thriving counterculture and established Santana Blues Band, which offered artistic release but not a direct conflict with his history. The accomplishment of his group, distinguished by their recognizable the 1969 Woodstock performance and chart-popular records such as Abras 1970, brought renown and mission. However, the unresolved simmering beneath the surface was trauma. Childhood's psychological wounds. Abuse frequently takes many different forms, including issues with trust, intimacy, as well as self-worth. Although Santana's public image radiated self-assurance and spirituality, especially after he started to follow the mistreatment of Sri Chinmoy throughout the 1970s, probably had an impact on his inner life. His acceptance of spirituality, which he took on the name Devadep, which means the light from the greatest lamp, implies a quest for purpose and mending that goes beyond the monetary success of his professional life. The mistreatment might have contributed to times when personal difficulties, including his drug-related conflicts usage throughout the 1970s, when he handled the rock star's excesses way of life, and the passing of classmates, such as Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix. Although Santana hasn't specifically connected his abuse, the trauma and substance use long-term consequences probably made the difficulties of celebrity and personal identity. The path taken by Santana to the real mending started when he faced the burden of his emotions maltreatment as an adult from childhood. In an interview with Rolling Stone in 2000, he said, openly discussing about going over the memories, helped make sense of the suffering he'd been carried. This revelation to the public was an important step to end the quiet that frequently upholds the disgrace of mistreatment. By telling his tale, Santana not only recovered his story, but also provided comfort to additional survivors, proving that recovery is achievable even with severe trauma. At the heart of Santana's engagement was his recovery in relation to spirituality. Early in the 1970s, he turned to Sri Chinmoy as a disciple. His lessons placed a strong emphasis on meditation, inner serenity, and transcendence. This Santana's spiritual path gave her a structure to deal with his suffering, providing a feeling of direction and affiliation with something bigger than himself. His Christianity was later adopted in 1992, deepened his spiritual foundation with forgiveness-related themes and atonement echoing in his songs, as well as one's own ideology. Songs such as Supernatural 1999's Maria Maria and CDs such as 2021's Blessings and Miracles demonstrate a faith in optimism and transformational attributes that probably resulted from his spiritual recovery. In addition to religion, Santana looked for treatment to deal with the psychological wounds from his mistreatment. Although he hasn't outlined the particulars of his journey of therapy, one of the most important tools for survivors is support of trauma experienced as a child. Counseling can be beneficial. People process memories that have been suppressed, reinterpret self-defeating beliefs, and create coping mechanisms for stressors. Therapy probably complemented Santana's religious activities, offering a room to explore the nuanced feelings connected to his mistreatment. His readiness to seek both psychological and spiritual avenues demonstrates his dedication to recovery, a procedure that allowed him to turn suffering into resiliency. The capacity of Santana to direct his putting pain into his songs is among the most noteworthy elements in his narrative. His playing on the guitar is distinguished by its often An expressive lyrical quality feels like an outward manifestation of his inner universe. Albums such as 1972's Caravanserai, which has its reflective fusion jazz sound, and 1999's Supernatural, which combines personal, because universal themes possess an emotional depth that appeals to the audience. Although Santana hasn't said it directly, that his songs confront his mistreatment, the healing potential of his performance implies a link between his trauma and his creative abilities. Music evolved into a haven where he could deal with his suffering. They exchange beauty, creating a deep link with viewers throughout the globe. In addition to his songs, Santana has utilized Hisa Forum to support those in need. He and Deborah, his first wife in 1998, King established the Foundation for Magro, which aids impoverished children in such as the arts, health, and education. The mission of the foundation reflects Santana's compassion for people dealing with suffering, possibly influenced by his personal childhood experiences of vulnerability. By funding initiatives that empower Santana's youth, contribute tending trauma cycles and disadvantage, transforming healing into a power for group excellence. Second, fighting tuberculosis, 1967. Carlos Santana was a youthful, aspiring musician enmeshed in the thriving music scene in San Francisco. He and his family moved here from 1955, Mexico to Tijuana, followed by the early 1960s in San Francisco. Santana was profoundly impacted by the counterculture movement in the city and its combination of psychedelic, blues, and rock noises. Motivated by musicians such as B.B. King, together with T-Bone Walker, he founded the Santana the Blues Band in 1966, a band that combined Latin and rock rhythms, showcasing his unique guitar style that is melodious. By 1967, the group was starting to create a stir, ensuring performances at locations such as the Phililmore West and a prelude to well-known artists like Steve Miller and The Who. These performances were crucial first steps. Stones, providing visibility to bigger audiences and drawing in the interest of Bill Graham, a music impresario, who would later obtain Santana's renowned Woodstock spot in 1969. At this pivotal moment, Santana's condition took a terrible turn. When he was 19, he received a diagnosis of a bacterial illness called TB, resulting from Mycobacterium TB, which mostly impacts the lungs. The TB was a rare and dangerous disease in the 1960s in the U.S., where advancements public health initiatives, such as hygiene, immunization, and antibiotics, have considerably decreased its widespread occurrence. Based on historical data, the number of TB cases in the U.S. has decreased to around 50,000 every year by the middle, in sharp contrast to the early 1960s, when it was a major cause in the 20th century of demise. But the illness persisted, a danger, especially in marginalized communities of immigrants or in regions has restricted healthcare access. Santana, a fresh arrival from Mexico living in modest living conditions, might have been more vulnerable as a result of socioeconomic elements like living in close quarters, circumstances, or insufficient nourishment. However, particulars regarding high exposure are not recorded. The diagnosis was a huge shock to both its timeliness and its harshness. Signs of tuberculosis, a chronic cough, fever, sweating at night, losing weight, and weariness would have been crippling for a young performer whose future was dependent on mental clarity and physical vitality. The sickness struck at the exact moment Santana was gaining speed and posing a threat to his dreams prior to them being fully flying. In addition to the physical effects, the stigma attached to tuberculosis, historically connected to disease and poverty, could have increased the emotional strain. However, Santana has not discussed this in public. Santana was diagnosed as accepted to San Francisco General Hospital, a government establishment renowned for serving a variety of underprivileged populations. He spent 3 months there, of acute care, a typical TB procedure in the 1960s. At the antibiotics such as Iziade, Time, derivatives of penicillin, and streptoicin constituted the mainstay of TB treatment, significantly transformed medical care since the 1940s. Although efficient, the therapies were difficult. Patients usually got shots every day or oral drugs, which may result in adverse side symptoms like weariness, nausea, and in streptoicin's case, possible loss of hearing. Santana's routine probably included excruciating doses of penicillin, needing strict medical oversight to guarantee that the illness was eliminated and to stop the emergence of strains that are resistant to drugs. The moment of Santana was diagnosed with TB, especially upsetting. In 1967, the Santana Blues Band was about to making a splash with their Fillmore performances and the first times of important behaviors that generate a devoted fan base. These gigs weren't only chances to practice their sound, but also opportunities to draw in industry focus, as demonstrated by Bill Graham's increasing curiosity. The 3-month pause brought on by Santana's. This development was halted by hospitalization, stopping the band from making money off of their initial buzz. For a new group in a competitive scene, a delay of this kind could have been disastrous, endangering prospects and a decline in significance. Carlos's absence, the band's center of creativity and emotion, probably strained the unity of the organization. Although band members such as Michael and Greg Rollier-Shreve kept practicing or performing in restricted roles, the absence of their visionary Limited's lead guitarist, their capacity to progress. The music scene in Francisco was booming, with new bands appearing all the time, and the compelled absence of Santana might have permitted rivals to occupy the space. Furthermore, the financial consequences of medical costs and missed performances might be under more pressure because the band depended on gigs to make money. However, this setback also brought attention to Santana's tenacity and the devotion of his band members. The blues band from Santana persisted, and after he recovered, Carlos came back focused. His Bill Graham was unfazed by his illness and kept supporting the band, obtaining their 1969 Woodstock concert. The experience of conquering tuberculosis probably got worse. Santana's determination, forming his perseverance, a trait that was later shown in his navigating the band's challenges, individual indulgences as well as professional changes. The recuperation of Santana from TB was evidence of his mental and physical strength. Early in 1968 or late in 1967, following his course of treatment, he was allowed to return to his band and continue playing acting. The effective elimination of the illness enabled him to recover his power. Even so, the experience probably made an impression that lasted, highlighting the significance of health and persistence. His comeback to the stage was characterized by a fresh sense of direction, as the Santana Blues Band and he kept enhancing their reputation, resulting in their victory at Woodstock and their debut album's release in 1969. Third, dealing with health scares in 2021 to 2022. Late in 2021, Carlos Santana experienced a serious health crisis when he had an unidentified cardiac procedure process. The news was released through Airmark, posted on social media by his team media, reporting that the operation was required to treat a medical condition that needed to be addressed right away. Although Santana didn't reveal anything about particulars regarding the status or the process, he conveyed his appreciation to his admirers for their encouragement and support about going back on stage. The situation's urgency resulted in the cancellation of his planned state performances at the Blues House at Mandalay Bay, a location in Las Vegas, where he had been performing on a regular basis since 2012. These postponements caused a significant portion of his career, as the Vegas residency was a financial foundation and a stage for establishing contact with fans. July 5, 2022, another concerning health issue confronted Santana, frightening incident when performing at the Pine-Clarkston Knob Music Theater, Michigan. When she was 74 years old, giving birth his characteristically high-energy set, he collapsed because of the heat on stage, fatigue as well as dehydration. The event took place during a summer trip when outdoor performance spaces may expose artists to excessive humidity and heat. Observers stated that Santana, in the middle of her performance, became abruptly confused before collapse, causing urgent worry from his group and team. Healthcare staff members hurried to his aid, and he was taken to a local hospital for assessment and care. February, Santana encountered yet another health challenge when he and a few other band members' CO-19 tests came up positive. The diagnosis occurred amid the ongoing worldwide epidemic, which had previously caused the live music sector for over 2 years. Because of the favorable tests, Santana had to postpone extra performances, such as shows planned as a stop on his current tour. The announcement of the cancellations was made using apologies, as Santana and his group highlighted their dedication to the security of the band, crew, and fans. The tests of the 2021 and 2022 health scares Carlos Santana's mental and physical health resilience. However, his reaction to each event revealed his persistent strength and dedication to his work. Following the cardiac operation, he came back to complete, within a few months, providing the same zeal and vigor that have shaped his professional life. After the stage breakdown, his speedy recuperation, and upon an honest dialogue with supporters, demonstrated his resolve to keep going performance while recognizing his physical boundaries. The diagnosis of CO-19, despite being disruptive, it was handled with prudence, enabling him to go back on tour. While doing so was safe. The Santana's capacity to handle these health difficulties was probably strengthened by his resilience throughout one's life, persevered through past experiences, including childhood sexual mistreatment and a diagnosis of TB at 19 years old. His religious convictions, which combine elements of Sri Chinmoy's Christianity and its teachings, offered the basis for overcoming hardship. Furthermore, his wife's assistance, Santana, Cindy Blackman, and his group was essential to his recuperation, providing both logistical and emotional support help. Santana's candor regarding his health issues, especially through public declarations, additionally promoted a relationship with supporters who came together to sending him encouraging words. Carlos, the transformation of Santana from a little Mexican village to international fame is evidence of his tenacity and musical brilliance. His creative combination of genres produced an enduring reputation, gaining him important and financial achievement. Even though severe catastrophes, maltreatment in childhood, severe sickness, a medical emergency, or the loss of influential people and individual hardships, he turned suffering into art and charity. Developing as a musical, a humanitarian, and an idol, his tale represents a life of victory over hardship, based on spirituality and a dedication to using music to heal.